Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, the official translation of One Piece chapter 1001 is out. You guys know how we do the video. Talk about the official translation, compare it to the fan translations, note any difference, talk about literally anything at all, and then round out the video with comments from you guys. You know, thinking about it, I should probably change this intro up a bit, because it's more like, talk about the fan translation compared to the official translation for 2 minutes, and then spend 20 minutes talking about comments. The false advertising is real. But yeah, today we have some things that we want to talk about. First off, if you guys don't know this, one of the huge draws, at least for me, not being able to read Japanese, for the official translation is the official translates the sound effects. And most of the time this is inconsequential. Sometimes it can be really interesting, like I'm always curious about Blackbeard's sound effects just because he's supposed to have a weird body. And so I wonder, or at least I wondered in the past whether his body made weird sounds and that's how people knew that. Of course, later we learned that he doesn't sleep, which is kind of a dead giveaway, but, you know, this was past me. But in this chapter, there's actually a sound effect that is somewhat relevant. After Zoro and Killer attack Kaido, we pan to Kaido and his neck is drawn back because that's where it was attacked, and we get a sound effect. And the sound effect is translated in the official as throb. Basically what this means, if you don't know, is throb refers to, in this context, an injury. A mild injury, but still an injury. Things throb when they hurt. And in fact, Oda used the same sound effect earlier in the chapter when Kaido attacked Luffy and clearly damaged him. And so this actually communicates something important that you don't necessarily get just from looking at the artwork itself. It tells you that Zoro and Killer hurt Kaido. And this leads to another difference in translation. In the fan translation, Kaido says after this, as expected, which is kind of ambiguous. In the official, it's instead translated as well done, implying that Kaido was impressed by Killer and Zoro's efforts. Which I think should be how we read this, because the general tone of the whole chapter and Kaido within it is that he sees these adversaries as worthy opponents. He says later specifically, "It's a shame that I have to kill you," meaning he does believe that they're actually capable of damaging him. Again, essentially, they hurt him. Not significantly, but they did. So let me tell you guys, I have seen a lot of people talking about the specificities of this scene online, like, well, Zoro and Killer actually cut him and drew blood, or he didn't. Don't you see the little flecks of blood that are in the panel itself? Well, no, those are just rocks or debris that's present throughout the chapter. It goes on and it goes on and it goes on. All of this conversation makes my head hurt because people are looking into the details to such an extent and kind of, missing the forest for the trees. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I do not care whether or not Zoro or Killer actually drew blood or not. That is not something that concerns me in the slightest. All that matters here is whether or not they are capable of hurting Kaido. And the chapter itself seems to be very, very explicit that they did. So we know that Zoro and Killer at least are at a level higher than Luffy earlier in this arc, where he went here forth and attacked Kaido, and nothing happened. In that fight, there was no throbbing, there was no ow, nothing. And actually, if you look into the chapter itself, Kaido actually cries out in pain. So ignoring all the specificities, which are for the most part useless, the whole premise of the chapter, what it is that you need to understand, is that the Supernova as a group were able to damage Kaido insignificantly. Maybe, but they did. This is an unusual occurrence for Kaido. He was impressed, and that was the tone of the chapter. But you gotta take this with also the understanding that the amount of damage they did was minimal, maybe even comparable to the Scabbards earlier, so they're probably still not strong enough to beat him, at least not using the same techniques they used here. Another thing that the official translation attempted to clarify was just how much damage Luffy suffered from Kaido's attack at the start of this chapter. The fan translation translated it like this: "Damn it, even though I saw the future, he's too fast." And Kaido says, "This is good, you're putting up a decent fight this time around." The official translation translated it like this: "Dang it, I was reading the future and everything. It's so fast." And Kaido says, "Very good, boy. You won't let the same one hit you head on twice." Basically implying that Kaido, while making contact with Luffy, didn't land a direct strike because Luffy was using Future Sight. This is actually one of the more unusual cases in which the fan translation took more liberties than the official translation. The official translation translated this accurately, and the fan translation basically did their own thing. But by being specific and having Kaido let us know what exactly happened, it removes all doubt about why Luffy survived, and why Kaido was impressed. Although given you could come to that conclusion yourself, I did kind of enjoy the fan translation a little bit more. The official kind of talks down to its audience, presuming that we couldn't piece together what was going on, which bothers me in a lot of other shows and doesn't usually happen in One Piece. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much what I had to talk about with the differences in translation. Let's get into the comments. Love the panel where Luffy is backed by the images of those worthy to fight Kaido. I find it interesting that Shanks made that list. Not surprising, just interesting. I always felt Shanks was just a touch below Whitebeard, as he was sick when we saw them together. Kaido doesn't seem to care and puts Shanks with Rocks, Roger, Odin, and Whitebeard. I also find it interesting he doesn't have Garp in that image, as it was Roger and Garp that handled Rocks. So I'm not surprised at all that Shanks is here, but there's just some things about Kaido which I don't feel like I fully understand to the level that I need to fully appreciate everything that's going on. Like, is Kaido, does he want to die or not? Does he want to commit suicide or not? Like, he's supposed to be looking for these people that are going to challenge or hurt him, and then supposedly a person like that currently exists, Shanks. But when has Kaido truly gone after Shanks at any time during the events of this story? Never. Like, the one time that they encounter each other, it's implied to be that was Shanks doing. So then it makes you question, what exactly does Kaido want? We're going to talk about this a little bit later on in the video, but the most prominent theory is that essentially Kaido wants to go down in a spectacular way in which he's remembered, which isn't officially revealed in the story yet, so we're kind of waiting on a moment like that. But I'm just going to assume that this is true, which then would explain why even in a fight versus Odin, who could potentially have killed Kaido, Kaido still didn't want to die or wasn't going to let himself be killed. I think that this also changes the way you think about Kaido a little bit. Like, for instance, you wouldn't consider a guy who wants to die as a person capable of running away, but if that's not really what Kaido wants, then that wouldn't be past Kaido. Whole purpose of me bringing this up is that this makes me reevaluate Kaido and Shanks' clash before Marineford, right? We're led to believe that Shanks intercepted Kaido, essentially prevented him from intervening in the war, and then showed up himself. Honestly, with Shanks being considered among the very small community of people that Kaido considers can actually fight him, that Kaido might have lost this battle. This was controversial for a really long time, but I think that it's true. I think that we should also keep in mind that in a one-on-one you should bet on Kaido, so maybe it was Shanks and his crew against just Kaido or not his entire crew. But still, maybe Shanks forced Kaido to run away, maybe Shanks forced Kaido into the sea. I just wish that, so much hype has been placed on Odin because Odin was responsible for Kaido's big ass scar, right? And so, it's like, if all these other people are capable of fighting Kaido and he considers them of the same level, where are all the other scars that these people would have inflicted on him? Does he just assume that they would have been capable, or, what exactly is the logic here, and why does Odin the strongest? I know that a lot of people are really insecure about this because a lot of people are using this panel as to help power scale, and while I don't think it's the end-all be-all, I definitely would use it. Like, for instance, Shanks is here, but Big Mom is not. And so people say, well, of course Big Mom would be able to fight Kaido, but it kind of paints Shanks in a different light. Like, Kaido thinks that, yeah, Big Mom could fight me, but she couldn't actually harm me, and that seems to be the case after their day-long fight earlier in Wano. They're both extremely tanky, and neither one of them can hurt the other. So that's not the kind of fight that Kaido's referring to. Then suggests that Shanks would probably be able to hurt Kaido where Big Mom couldn't. Now, does this mean Shanks is stronger than Big Mom in some respects? Yes, but there's different kinds of strength. Big Mom has defensive strength more than offensive, it appears. Certainly in a matchup with Kaido, she probably can't damage him, and Shanks probably could. But if Kaido landed a shot on Big Mom, it wouldn't do the same thing maybe that it might do to Shanks. Although Shanks would have some other way of avoiding it, obviously. Probably future sight. But that's just me though. But at the same time, if Kaido considers Shanks one of the few who could actually fight him, then I think that you have to assume that Shanks could probably also fight Big Mom. Which basically means that Shanks is a threat to both Kaido and Big Mom, where Kaido and Big Mom are only a threat to maybe Shanks and not each other. So I'm awarding points to Shanks here. But then again, we still don't know exactly how Big Mom's defense works in comparison to Kaido. It might work differently, and therefore a means that Shanks has to damage Kaido may not work on Big Mom. Either way, like you, I'm looking at this, and this intrigues me. Another interesting detail here, and an interesting character that was excluded from Kaido's list, was Rayleigh. He included both Oden and Roger from the Roger Pirates, but not Rayleigh. Is this a case of Rayleigh not possessing Oden's skill in dealing damage, or is this a case of Oda had a limited amount of panel space and didn't want to include everybody? I don't want to hear any yapping, you guys know that this could be true. In addition to this, it's possible Kaido is only referring to enemies that he has actually fought. Now we know that he has fought Big Mom, but Big Mom is not here, so I maintain that that is significant. However, maybe Kaido fought both Roger and Oden. We know he fought Oden, and even Rocks for that matter, but never fought Rayleigh. The same thing could be true for Garp. Also in the same line of thinking, Kaido could be referring to just pirates here, thus eliminating Garp from the onset as a person to include in this panel. In the official, it's translated as Kaido thinking, how high will your ceiling go? Referring to Luffy. Luffy is a pirate, so his ceiling should be in reference to other pirates. That makes sense to me. Personally, I think that there is zero chance that Garp would not have been included in this list if it was purely who could fight Kaido and damage him. He's included as being a contemporary of Whitebeard, Roger, and Rocks. And the last bit of speculation which intrigues me, some people mentioned this, is maybe this is a list of people that Kaido would actually compare Luffy to. Like, comparing Luffy to Roger, Shanks, and Oden makes a ton of sense. Whitebeard as well, even. And then you have just Rocks here, but we don't know anything about Rocks, but maybe Rocks could actually be more comparable to Luffy than we would imagine right now. And this would explain why you wouldn't include Big Mom. Because for sure, Big Mom is really nothing like Luffy when it comes to what Luffy's final form might look like. But yeah, you kind of see how I complicated this quite a bit, and so this is why you can't derive definitive conclusions, a lot of definitive conclusions from this, just based on who is here and who is not. We don't know the exact logic that Oda used in creating the panel. That being said, my main takeaway point is Big Mom is not here. And it kind of changes my impression of Kaido and Shanks' fight from before Marineford. But while we're still here, like, we learned from this chapter that Kid can probably damage Kaido because Kaido somewhat vindicated Kid in his efforts in this chapter. Like, he's not damaging him significantly, but the capability exists for Kid to potentially be able to do significant damage. And the whole idea that Kid uses is that I will be big and I will crush you. Well, if Kid could potentially damage Kaido, then I think we should believe that Shiki should also be able to damage Kaido in the same way. Using his float fruit, he can make huge things float very similarly to Kid, and if those things crush Kaido, it would work the same way. So again here, it makes you doubt about whether this list is complete. If it's supposed to be the entirety of people that are capable or were capable of damaging Kaido. It's also a pretty cool little detail that basically, because how we know that Luffy's Ryu works, that Whitebeard's Devil Fruit would almost function in the same way. He could shock Kaido and hurt him from the inside. So Whitebeard doesn't necessarily have to have the level of hockey of Oden or Shanks or, Roger, and still be able to hurt him because of his Devil Fruit. But anyway, I could talk about this panel literally forever. It's super interesting to me, but let's get into the next comment. After watching the most recent episode, I think Rocks had the Mera fruit, the red icon on his flag, and the focus it seemed to put on the flames in the next scenes. There might be more capabilities to that fruit that Blackbeard knows about, which is why he'd want it so much. This seems to be a growing theory within the community, one I find to be very, very intriguing. So here's the thing that you gotta know, we gotta preface this before we get into it. The reason why this hasn't been a popular theory over the years is because of the belief that Oda likes his form of organization. Essentially, we all presume that Blackbeard is going to get a third devil fruit, right or wrong. That is the community's belief. He has what he considers to be the strongest paramecia, the world considers to be the strongest paramecia, I should say, in Whitebeard's Gura. He has what he considers to be the strongest Logia in the Yami, and so everyone thinks, okay, well, Blackbeard is going to get the strongest zone type fruit, or what he thinks is the strongest zone type fruit, which is why the majority of the theories focus on Kaido, his dragon, clearly a very top tier zone, or Marco, Phoenix, or maybe even Sengoku's Buddha. But here's the thing that you got to keep in mind with Oda. I believe that Oda's editors actually follow Japanese theories, and they basically stated this on multiple occasions that they're not above changing certain things in the story if they feel like the community has already predicted it. And so the theories around Blackbeard's third devil fruit has, these theories that we've just talked about minus Sengoku are, heavily predicted to the point of when they happen, it wouldn't be cool because it's surprising. It would just be cool because it's inherently cool. But Oda loves to be surprising, which means that he could think about it and decide, you know what, I have a better answer. The people here assume that I'm going to go strongest Paramecia, strongest Logia, then strongest Zone, but I'm going to do something different. I'm going to give Blackbeard 2 Logia fruits. For me, that's how I see a very realistic sequence of events. So maybe from the very beginning, Oda wasn't intending to give Blackbeard the Mera, but over the course of all these years, he's like, that's what they're not going to expect. And it could still be very satisfying. But here's what we know for sure. Blackbeard definitely has interest in the Mera because he sent Jesus Burgess to go collect the Mera from Dressrosa. Oda included that little detail and could turn it into more. This would have even more significance if this was the devil fruit of Rox. When you look at Rox's Jolly Roger on his mast, there's little almost flame horn type devil fruit looking thing on the symbol itself. It looks like flame. That's what everyone thought when they first saw it, that it looks similar. So this isn't impossible. And then giving Ace Rox's old devil fruit, Rox being the enemy of his father Roger, is just really cool. It's a really cool idea conceptually. And then what this comment is alluding to is in the anime episode, you had the Rox symbol in Jolly Roger, and then immediately after you pan to the fight in God Valley where everything is on fire. My personal opinion, this could be nothing, but this could also be something. As I said, I find the theory intriguing. I also like the idea of Blackbeard collecting all of his devil fruits from the crew that he was a member of from 20 years, the Whitebeard Pirates. So you got a fruit from Thatch, you got a fruit from Whitebeard, and you got your fruit from Ace. I also think just stylistically, in terms of drawing, cool factor, it's difficult for me to picture Blackbeard as a dragon like a Kaido or as a phoenix like Marco. That's something that you have to play around a bit in your mind to even make it work at all. Whereas darkness, fire, plus the Gura is just a combination that stylistically, it's gonna hit. I also like it because the Yami is not a traditional Logia, which means that the Mera would give Blackbeard traditional Logia abilities he does not already have. And some people might say, well, we're kind of over, right, the fact that Logias can't be hit because we have Haki now, but I still imagine that Oda's got some cool things left for Logias in the story, like regarding Akainu. I kind of imagine maybe in that fight, Akainu might exhibit abilities similar to Katakuri. I know Katakuri's fruit is not a Logia, but I could see Logias being used in the same way, in conjunction with Observation Haki. And then you also potentially have setup, if this is true, of Blackbeard's interest in Sabo, having the Mera now, which would lead Blackbeard into events concerning the Revolutionary Army in Sabo, so that's a huge checkmark for me in terms of just story, especially if this is foreshadowing. That's excellent. But yeah, I guess the greatest question that we would have is what is the greatest advantage for Blackbeard in seeking the Mera? In terms of power, because all of his devil fruits, if he gets a third one, it has to add some significant power boost to him. So maybe the Mera is capable of something that we're not currently aware of, that Ace never demonstrated. And as for that, I think that anything's possible, right? Luffy's doing a lot of things with rubber that isn't necessarily intuitive. There's some fruits out there that accomplish very wild things like Sugar's ability, and so I think that there's definitely some potential. I'm not saying it is the most likely, but there's some potential that the Marimare might have a really, really cool secondary ability that isn't intuitive. And at the same time, I just want to make this clear. I think that after Haki was introduced, the community is kind of undervaluing Logias now because we think, oh, they're easy, their one advantage is nullified, so now it's just element. But like things like Awakening for a Logia could be absurdly powerful, such that Blackbeard would want a traditional Logia for its Awakening. And this will all become very apparent to us when we really start fighting Logias. Serious contenders like the Admirals. Just imagine for a second, Blackbeard awakens all of his fruits, especially if he gets a third one. Good lord. Oh, good lord. But yeah, just to make this very clear, I don't think that this idea is the most likely, but I wouldn't discount it. Next comment, if Killer can turn his Punishers black, would you give him more respect? I want to make this very clear. If Killer does anything, I'll give him more respect. But up until now, Killer has really done nothing. He is all portrayal, all hype, but he lost to Zoro in a fight, and that's what we have about him. I'm not like anti-Kid Pirates, I'm not anti-Killer, I just want to see them do these things that make them worthy of kind of their place in the story. Making his Punishers black would obviously do that. Even in this last chapter, there's some debate about this. I don't really want to get into it, but it portrays Killer and Zoro on about the same tier. That's my impression of the chapter, which is already giving me, in my mind, more points to Killer that weren't there previously. That being said, I'm not exactly sure how Killer is going to get stronger, but I know how Zoro's going to get stronger. We'll see if Oda gives attention to Killer or not. Next comment, I feel like no one complained about Naruto whenever he'd train for a week and come back stronger, so I don't know why Luffy's Ryu training would be treated any different. So this is just my personal opinion, maybe other people see this a bit different, but like for instance, Goku's training in Dragon Ball was all very, very cool to me. When he, went into the little bubbly water thing to heal, or he trained within the gravity deal, or he went into the hyperbolic time chamber when time stopped. All those things were really, really cool. So because they're cool, they make the training itself more entertaining. I found the same thing was true when I watched Naruto. I felt like all the ways in which he trained, even Sage training where he sat underneath the waterfall, depiction-wise, I really enjoyed that. Even if it is similar to what's going on here, the actual way that it happened was cool. I don't really see Luffy's Ryu training in the prison on the same level. Thus, you'd be more likely to see complaints about it. Personally, this is just my opinion, you're welcome to disagree, but those elements of Wano were some of the weakest for me that I've enjoyed the least. Which is the exact opposite of these things that you're talking about from Naruto or Dragon Ball, which are some of the things I remember and I was hyped about. Maybe a good way to explain this is to look at The Karate Kid. I watched The Karate Kid recently. Mr. Miyagi trained the main character, but in very not traditional ways. Like, oh, you're gonna learn this move, but you're gonna not understand how exactly you're gonna get it as you do it. So I really, and most everybody enjoyed those things from The Karate Kid, because attention was paid to the training itself. It wasn't just keep punching and then eventually you'll get it. No, it's wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off, and now I can, deflect your punches. Hopefully I explained this well enough so that you guys that don't understand maybe a little bit better. And so when the training is neither interesting nor that cool, you have a lot more room for people to complain about it. Because people just straight up don't complain about things typically that they actually like. Did anyone draw any attention to the similarity between 2 Yonko in this arc and 2 Warlords in this arc? Because in the Paradise arc, which foreshadowed a lot of Wano, Thriller Bark, we had 2 Warlords and Zoro almost died in an act of loyalty. So the second Warlord leaves. Could be something similar in Wano. I don't really have anything to add to this. This is a connection that I had made in the past, but I want to remind people of because it would be really cool if it happened. There's certainly a lot of similarities between Thriller Bark and Wano. I guess I do feel compelled to trigger people. So this comment basically said that Zoro almost died in an act of loyalty. And this is how the vast majority of people, 99% of people, interpret that scene, and I do think that it's true. But there's also a little element of selfishness in Zoro's decision, because we learned from very early on in One Piece in the Mihawk fight that Zoro would rather die than be defeated. So in a situation in which the Strides are defeated, Zoro chose to sacrifice himself, which is loyalty or selfishness becomes a more interesting question from this perspective. It could be both. I find this conversation interesting because in the idea that these Strides lose and are defeated here in Wano, would Zoro choose death before defeat? Essentially, like, he doesn't want to run away, ever. So would he choose, to essentially say, hey, come kill me, rather than be forced to run away? And in a situation like this, it becomes even more clear about how Zoro is being selfish rather than loyal. Next comment, at the end of Pirate Warriors 4, Blackbeard showed up at Wano, and the allies don't really defeat Kaido, he just says F it and leaves. I wonder how true that'll be. Pirate Warriors 4 was actually really interesting because it dealt with the Wano arc, but we're not even through with the Wano arc, so you had events that had not occurred in the manga occurring in this game. So a lot of people wonder how much foreshadowing is here is not. I tend to believe like this game is going to be 100% wrong in most every way. There might be some things that are incidentally true or similar, but I don't think that the game developers were given any hints. Not in like hugely significant ways. Like, yeah, Blackbeard showed up in Wano, but so did Sabo, so did the Marine Smoker, Aokiji. Like, the games basically were acted from the perspective of the community, I think. That's not to say that Blackbeard definitely won't be there, I wouldn't read too much into the game. But if you're curious, and we'll keep track of this when we get to the end of Wano, just to see, but the sequence of events, essentially, Blackbeard shows up randomly in the middle of this fight, and then Kaido shows up, and Blackbeard runs away, so he doesn't actually do anything. Big Mom's there, but then Blackbeard shows up, and then Big Mom pirates show up through the mirror world and grab Big Mom and take her through the mirror world, and they run away. And then it becomes a group up fight against Kaido, missing a lot of the characters later introduced within Wano. But basically the key players are Luffy, Sabo, Aokiji, Carrot for some reason. Like, she does a lightning attack that really messes with Kaido. Momonosuke even. All of them group up, and finally Kaido's like, you know what, you guys are pretty strong, I'm gonna leave now. And then they party. And Kaido leaving is basically an admission from the game developers that Oda doesn't know how to kill Kaido. What do you guys expect us to be able to do? Come on now. Next comment, JB, no transition to Act 4 yet. Morge, the raid on Onigashima will fail. Like, I don't know why, but you kind of want to add like a evil laughter after that. The raid on Onigashima will fail. You almost want to vicariously tell Morge to calm down. So basically what I'm gathering, a lot of the comments believe this, and I think that there's reason to, I don't hate it, is that the reason why Act 3 has not ended, because the end of Act 3 will be the defeat of the Alliance. Act 4, I guess, then would be start off with the transition, and then the battle will resume in some way, if Wano follows a 5-act structure of traditional kabuki. Next comment, I just feel like Kaido's greatest defeat won't be so simple. When Roger and Whitebeard died, they changed the world. What Kaido is doing right now won't make that big of a difference. I mean, yes, he is going for the One Piece, but this battle hasn't happened when they were going for the One Piece. Honestly, I feel like Kaido saw Rocks, a legend, possibly the strongest pirate of all times, died in a way that didn't change the world. His existence was nearly removed. Kaido wants to be remembered, so I feel like something is going to happen which will make Kaido's defeat great. It will send ripples throughout the world. I guess that this is a really good explanation for why I've always felt like other factions needed to be involved in this fight, because if Kaido goes down in a similar way to a Chichibukai like Crocodile or Moria, where it's very self-contained and the Strides deal with them, it removes the great world event. So you need Marines here, you need revolutionaries, world government, other factions need to be present to raise the stakes of this battle and the audience. But yeah, I 100% agree. Kaido's entire objective appears to be that he wants to go out flashily. The circumstances right now, as they are, do not warrant that. Meaning, I think that we should think that there's going to be some kind of great change, however that happens. And finally, we have the last comment. Law can't sacrifice himself. His goal is to find out what the will of D is, meaning he needs to reach Laugh Tale to find out. I understand what this comment is trying to say, but also the inherited will is a thing in One Piece. It's like saying, like, Ace can't die. He has to, continue to make Whitebeard the Pirate King. I know that's not a one-for-one example, but basically, Pedro is probably a better example. Pedro can't die. He's got to see the dawn, right? It's the same sort of logic, and it doesn't have to be true, because inherited will. If this is what Law wants, then before he dies, he'll probably make it clear to Luffy, and then Luffy will add this to his growing list of things that he must accomplish for other people, which in a way would be a pretty spectacular way to make Luffy interested in the will of D. But yeah, guys, that is pretty much all I had to say today. As always, I'm curious as to what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video if you like the video, dislike the video if you dislike the video, subscribe if you want to be notified for my future content, and as always, guys, have a wonderful day.